There are things you give up with time. It's such a stark, simple statement, isn't it? But when it comes straight from the mouth of one of the sharpest, most successful minds in modern financial history, you really have to stop and listen. We literally spend our entire lives acquiring things, right? Acquiring wealth, knowledge, experiences. But what exactly happens when the clock starts winding down? Well, today, we're taking a close look at the final, truly profound insights of the legendary investor Charlie Munger, straight out of one of his very last interviews in 2023.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today's material is absolutely going to flip how we think about aging and ambition. We're going to dive right into Charlie Munger's incredibly pragmatic late-stage philosophy. We'll look at how a billionaire navigated the end of his life, specifically what he consciously chose to let go of, and maybe even more importantly, what he enthusiastically grabbed hold of. Okay, let's get into it.
Section 1. Decisions on Wealth. Diverging from the Oracle.
So Munger always believed that age and wealth basically just make you more of what you fundamentally are. They act like a giant magnifying glass for your true nature. And we can see an incredible contrast in how this played out between two guys who built an absolute empire together. Look at the left side here. We've got Charlie Munger. By the time of this interview, he had already passed more than half of his wealth right to his descendants. He kept it in the family. Now, over on the right, his legendary partner, Warren Buffett. Buffett took a totally different route. He pledged the vast majority of his massive fortune to public foundations to be distributed over the next 100 years. Now, Munger totally acknowledged that Buffett's approach had massive significance, but he didn't follow his partner's lead.
Instead, Munger bluntly stated, "I made exactly the opposite decision." He did note his wealth was smaller compared to Buffett's, but the principle is what matters here. The absolute confidence to just carve his own path. Even after decades of this parallel thinking that literally built Berkshire Hathaway, Munger was perfectly comfortable letting go of expected societal norms or any pressure to match his partner's philanthropic legacy. He knew his own mind, and he just made the decision that worked for him.
Moving right along to Section 2, Releasing the 200-pound tuna, the wisdom of surrender.
So what actually happens to your lifelong dreams when your body finally starts to slow down? Well, 96 is a pretty incredible number. In his final interview, just shy of turning 100, Munger reflected on his physical state, and he pointed out that he actually felt significantly older and weaker right then compared to how he felt when he was 96. I mean, really think about that perspective. Most of us think of 96 as incredibly old, but to Munger, nearing 100, 96 was like the good old days of relative strength. And this physical decline forced a very, very pragmatic shift in his daily priorities.
Which brings us to another massive number, 200 pounds. For Munger, this number represented the ultimate bucket list item. For years and years, he harbored this intense, super physically demanding goal. He wanted to reel in a 200-pound tuna. It's that classic symbol of man versus nature, right? The kind of thing that requires immense physical strength and endurance.
This is such a brilliant look at how our desires evolve. Munger admitted that when he was younger, he would have paid literally any amount of money to catch that 200-pound tuna. But he never caught one. It was always that elusive, unachieved goal. But here's where the profound wisdom of surrender really kicks in. In his final days, Munger realized it was just too much work. The physical strength required was gone. So his conclusion? If someone offered him the perfect opportunity today, he wouldn't just decline to fish for it. He said he wouldn't even go out on the boat after them. The desire was completely 100% gone. The sheer relief of consciously surrendering an exhausting pursuit, that is a masterclass in knowing when to just let go.
Section 3. Grabbing unfair advantages. A proper old age. Now, letting go of physical struggles definitely doesn't mean giving up on life. Munger surrendered the tuna, sure, but he actively embraced a whole new set of circumstances. His body might have wakened, but his mind? Still razor sharp. And he found this entirely new rhythm. For what he called a proper old age, he kept up a remarkably busy social schedule. He was super active on Zoom, chatting with people all over the globe. He had regular breakfasts, frequent lunches with friends and colleagues. Now, Munger admitted he didn't meticulously plan this phase out. It just kind of happened organically. But the secret sauce here is that when it happened, he actively welcomed it. He leaned right into the connections and the intellectual stimulation that, didn't require pulling a giant fish out of the ocean. And Munger summarized this entire phase absolutely perfectly. He said, "I am very good at recognizing unfair advantages, and when they came, I just grabbed them. Boom, boom, boom." How great is that? That is the classic Charlie Munger investor mindset applied directly to the aging process. Throughout his whole career, his absolute genius was spotting an unfair advantage in the market and jumping on it. Well, he realized that old age brings its own unfair advantages, right?
Wisdom, a slower pace, the luxury of a totally cleared schedule just to talk and think with interesting people. And just like in his business prime, when those perks showed up, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed them. Boom, boom, boom.
Section 4. The final laugh. Knowing when it's too late.
I have to say, right up to the very end, Munger never ever lost his dry sense of humor and his ridiculously sharp observation of human nature. While he was busy grabbing all those unfair advantages, he casually noted the one grab he never made was for a third wife. Why? Well, in his typical, incredibly blunt fashion, he stated it was simply too late. Actually, it's pretty self-aware. He acknowledged that for some folks, marriage is an absolute necessity. He pointed out that some people are just so much more comfortable inside a marriage than outside of it that they literally need it just to feel human. It's just how they're wired, for sure.
But for those people nearing his age who still feel that necessity, Munger had this hilarious piece of advice. He said, "I recommend the 100-year-old dating app." But then, and this is classic, he immediately follows it up with this incredible punchline. But you'll find that if you put it in that, not many 100-year-olds want it. They're just lying there. It's just a spectacular display of wit. He accepted his reality, observed the world without judging it, and still found a way to just laugh at the sheer absurdity of the human condition, right at the edge of a century of life.
So that brings us to the end of our explainer today. And I want to leave you with a thought, a real question to chew on. Charlie Munger basically taught us that life is just an ongoing process of editing. It's all about knowing when to break away from the crowd, knowing when to snatch up those unfair advantages right in front of you, and absolutely crucially, knowing when to drop the heavy lines. So what is the 200-pound tuna that you need to let go of? What exhausting pursuit are you still holding on to that just isn't serving you anymore? And what amazing new advantages could you grab if your hands were finally free? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Charlie Munger's final lessons. Keep learning, keep adapting, and I'll see you next time.